Welcome wildlings, Colin here, the Wild CEO. Today's video is going to be some common misconceptions of the paleo diet. Now, when I first got into nutrition heavily, it started with the zone diet, and then that led me through to the paleo diet, which was big in CrossFit at the time. Now, finding paleo was like a light bulb moment for me. Since then, you really use the word paleo that often because of some of the negative connotations and because of a lot of the misconceptions, which we're going to talk about today. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of merit in the methodology behind it. And so now I've evolved, pun intended, to recommending a way of eating that I call real food nutrition. And I will unpack that a little bit in today's video and other videos as well. But today it's just about some of the common misconceptions of paleo, why I think paleo is still a perfect foundation to build your own diet on. And as with anything, some of the kind of dogma around diet and how people think it's about one specific way of eating and how there's certain guidelines, even though there's no governing body or one person that tells you what is or isn't paleo. Like, it's very much up to interpretation. That's how you should approach any diet, especially your own. You should interpret the things that work for you, that you think make sense for you, and then test and get feedback by listening to your body, right? So let's go into some misconceptions and then really a broad overview of what the paleo diet is what we'll start with, okay? Let's get to it. So the basic idea behind the paleo diet is based on when we were living as hunter-gatherers. Okay, so if you take modern anatomical humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, and you look at the timeline of when paleontologists have been able to ascertain when we evolved, they're guesstimating it was between 200 and 250,000 years ago. We didn't start farming until about 10 to 11, maybe 12,000 years ago in certain parts of the world. Now, farming versus hunter-gathering, hunting and gathering, they're a very, very different way of life, and they have a lot of byproducts of living that lifestyle for the human animal, okay? So what happened when we wandered around as nomadic hunter-gatherers, we would move with the seasons, we would move in search of game, we would move in search of water and better weather and shelter and all these things. So we would be moving a lot, that's one, and our food would be acquired from Mother Nature herself. Okay, we would scavenge kills, we would hunt animals, we would obviously plants and tubers and nuts and seeds and anything that we can find in the wild that was edible, we would eat that. When we became farmers, we started settling down and we had to watch this one plot of land. So that's a huge mismatch immediately for our species. When we were hunter-gatherers, we moved a lot, and then when we moved to farmers, we started settling down. And then if you look at some of the data and some of the research, farming provided a worse lifestyle. It provided more malnutrition, less nutrients, and required more labor than a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But let's kind of keep this on point because, again, this is on the paleo diet and some of the misconceptions. So I'm not going to go fully into all the theory behind it. But basically, 10,000 years ago, humans started farming. We started growing crops, cultivating, and moving from, let's say, a fat and protein-based diet, which was primarily what hunter-gatherers lived on, most hunter-gatherers, from animals, obviously. And then we moved to become an agrarian farming culture, which is based on crops, which are primarily starch. And so then now you see, even today in the modern food world we live in, most of the processed food is starch-based, carb-based, sugar-based foods. That fundamental change is what paleo diet is based on. It's based on going back to eating the way our ancestors would have eaten. And we obviously have a lot of fossil record to support this. We also have modern day hunter-gatherers that live like this, that is a very good glimpse into our ancestors would have lived. And we can look at the foods they eat, how they prepare food, how they even, from things like the social dynamic of hunter-gatherer groups and how they mate. And there's just, it's really fascinating. And that's what the ancestral mind's all about, is kind of understanding that. But again, let's kind of stay on topic. So foods that are invented post-agriculture, so since we've been farming, like this kind of stuff, the idea is to avoid those foods. And so those primary food groups are grains, refined and processed food of any kind, but again, there are certain things that require processing that doesn't make it bad. But I mean, things like vegetable oils, these that are not natural, that have very high omega-6 profiles, that are just not things that would have been ubiquitous in nature for our ancestors when they were hunter-gatherers, those are the foods we want to try to avoid, okay? So they include beans, lentils, any grain, obviously refined sugar, and then even beyond that, you get into actually how many macronutrients that you would have eaten, and we're going to kind of cover that in one of the misconceptions today, okay? So the foods to avoid: grains, sugar, beans, lentils, anything that's processed or refined. Dairy is a big one that our ancestors would have not have eaten a lot. Now, there are some hunter-gatherer tribes especially like today, the Maasai who eat a lot of dairy, they pierce the neck of the cattle that they watch, and they put that into some of the milk, the blood in the milk, and they whip it up and they make this like nice yogurt beverage. That's kind of a topic for another day. The baseline for paleo is dairy is excluded, and there are a lot of issues with dairy, and unless you're doing raw, full-fat, local dairy, for most people, it's not an ideal thing. But again, let's just kind of focus on today, stay on topic, okay? Those are the foods you avoid. Now, what do you eat? Well, you eat raw, real plants, tubers, nuts, and seeds, and then, of course, animal products. And obviously, you have your fruit and your vegetables, right? So you have these foods represent real food, and that's why when I call it real food, when I'm talking about the way of eating that I recommend, I use capital R, capital F, and then I point to foods like that, and then I point to foods like this, and I say this isn't real food. So that's the basic premise of the paleo diet. Now let's get into some of the common misconceptions. Now, of course, I can't make this video super long because, again, it's YouTube, and we all have a lot to do and short attention spans. Okay, so let's just kind of dive right into the number one most common misconception that I hear about the paleo diet is it is a meat-only diet, and that is completely and utterly not true. We'll use two examples of hunter-gatherers. You have the Inuit, which are, the Eskimo, which is considered a derogatory term, but they live in northern climates. Their diet is primarily animal products and primarily saturated fat and protein from seals and bears and fish, and basically very little plants are in their diet. In fact, the only plants they really eat are seaweed. Then you have the Kitavans, or the Kitavans, or however you say it. They're an island tribe. I believe it was off the coast of New Zealand. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But they are an observed modern-day hunter-gatherer that we studied in probably like the 20s and 30s. And their diet was actually primarily starch through a yam-like sweet potato that was native to the island. They were an island people. And so they ate, it was estimated about 70% of their calories from carbs, from starches, yams that they ate and prepared from wild herself. And then the rest of their diet was coconut and fish and fruit and other things that you would find on an island. Now you have two almost nearly opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the macro profile. And that will lead into the next misconception, which I'm going to kind of wait till we get to that. But a thing that people confuse with paleo is they are always only thinking about carbs, protein, and fat, and how many and whatever, but that's not what paleo is about. Paleo is first a question about food quality. Where does the food come from? Is this food natural to our species, or is it highly refined, processed food that our ancestors would not have eaten? You have like grass-fed beef on this end, for example, and then you have like Annie's graham cracker crap on this end. You can see the difference. You can see the difference in quality. You can see the difference in how the nutrients of that food, or even the lectins and the phytates and the other anti-nutrients that are in grain products, how they're going to attack the body, how the meat is not going to do that, how the meat has B vitamins and just like pound for pound more nutrition than you can ever fathom, especially when compared to something like this. That is fundamentally what paleo is about. It's a quality question. It's not a quantity question. So that's really the biggest misconception when it comes to paleo diet, or really any diet. And, most diets try to answer the question of like how many carbs, protein, and fat to eat, but there are only ranges, and that's why it gets very fuzzy. All right, so let's get to number two. So number two is, again, about the macros, which are macronutrients. That's carb, protein, and fat, right? Whereas micronutrients are going to be the vitamins and minerals and those smaller micro things, right? Whereas the macros are the big constituents of the food. People think paleo is inherently low carb. Well, it kind of is. But again, paleo, the way I interpret it and the way I think you should interpret it, is first a quality discussion. Ask yourself questions about your food and the quality and where it came from and whether it's ancestrally appropriate. That's what paleo is about. Then you tweak things based on your own lifestyle, whether that is less carbs, more carbs, whatever it is, right? More protein, more fat, less fat. If you're eating within the confines of a paleo style diet where you're eating quality ingredients, then you can tweak those to your heart's content. And that's perfectly fine, right? So that's a really big misconception, is people think that paleo, or any diet really, aside from keto, keto is basically about almost no carbs, right? Sure, I'll give you that, right? It's not just about the quantity, right? Get that? It's very important. What I found, and I talk about this a lot in my other videos when I talk about real food, is when you focus on quality of ingredients and you move to an ancestral-based way of eating, a paleo-based way of eating, and you eschew stuff like this, right? And you move to stuff like this, well, the macros almost don't matter, right? Your body tends to take care of itself. If you're craving protein, you probably need more protein. Go eat some protein. If you're not getting satisfied and you feel like you're hungry and you're snacking too much, eat more fat. Reduce your carbs. If you're doing CrossFit or some high-intensity sport and you're not really doing well on a lower carb style of eating because you've tested it for 60 days, cycle in more carbs. Imagine that. It's so amazing. But again, this requires work. It requires personal testing, treating yourself like an experiment and being a scientist and objectively looking at data. Instead, in the diet wars, people want to go and be keyboard warriors and talk about this study or that study or this or that, and then do absolutely no research of their own whatsoever. And that is a huge, huge failing of all nutrition and diet research and recommendations and everything, right? Okay, so that's 2. Let's get to 3 and 4 so we can wrap this up. Another big misconception is this idea that nutritionists use a lot. I love seeing these college-trained nutritionists that teach the food pyramid, which is completely and utterly broken and backwards, right? And then they use things like, well, one of the risks of the paleo diet is it eliminates a food group completely, which obviously talking about beans or grain products, right? Cereal grains. You don't need any of it. You don't need any of the nutrition in it either. Eating fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and healthy animals trumps this kind of crap and grains and bread and anything any day of the week times 1,000. You could take an ounce of meat, and there's more nutrition in that ounce of meat than a loaf of freaking bread, and almost across the board, right? Don't fall victim to that typical dogma. It's not saying anything of importance. It's not making a claim about anything. It's just saying, well, you're eliminating a food group, which the food pyramid has established is a food group, like grains are a food group, and if you eliminate that, that's bad. But why? Why is it bad? And have we actually looked at that food group and whether that should even belong there or not? That's the question you should be asking yourself. Are the negatives of something like a highly refined, highly palatable, highly processed bread grain product versus not eating that? Like, have you weighed those? Have you looked at those? And I can tell you without a doubt, the bread stuff, the grain stuff, it's not good for you. It's not good for any human, especially the crap that you're buying at the store that's on the shelf. That stuff is junk food. And it does not belong in any human diet. It doesn't, right? And then there's a lot of things with leaky gut and gluten intolerance, and I'm not going to get into that today, right? But there's almost no case where you could prove that bread would be good for a human. It just doesn't make any sense. Like when people say that, they have no clue what they're freaking talking about. They need to break it down. They need to analyze why that's the case. Why is it bad to eliminate a food group? And then better question, is it bad to eliminate a food group? And I would say, based on the research and all the data and personal research myself and what I've seen with other people, it's not bad. Grains don't belong. And beans are pretty much empty calories. They're just high carb, very nutrient lacking. They have phytates. They're not great. There are a lot of anti-nutrients. I would say no. All right, so that's going to cover, I think that's enough for now. I know it's a lot, but it's going to cover some of the common misconceptions of the paleo diet. And that's going to cover most of the misconceptions of almost every diet, right? You find a lot of these same misconceptions that people fall into when they're evaluating any diet or way of eating or whatever. If you focus on something like paleo and ancestral eating, right, which is what I call real food, that's based on quality ingredients, as close to nature as possible, sourced as well as possible, processed and made and whatever as good as possible, and that is the foundation of your eating plan, well, the rest is going to take care of itself. And that's what I recommend for most people. And it does include, as a byproduct of thinking that way, it includes eliminating products that are toxic to the human animal, which are grains and sugars and refined seed oils, little poison for the body. I mean, it's just, this should be illegal to sell. Like, it's illegal to buy and sell marijuana at the grocery store. Yet this stuff is legal. Are you freaking kidding me? Come on. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or comments about this or some other topics you want me to cover, drop them below. Leave a comment below some misconceptions that you've heard or seen, whether it's about paleo or keto or any other diet that you might be following. And make sure you like and subscribe. I put out a lot of videos like this. I'm going to be spending more time on this. And really what the channel's about, it's about looking back to our ancestral past so that we can live better today and make better decisions based on human biology and not just based on what some new recent research may or may not have said and whether it was funded by Coca-Cola or not. There's a lot of nonsense in the food and nutrition space, and I'm hoping to dispel some of that and simplify some of that. Because at the end of the day, the first principles of human health are very simple. It's like, stop eating the crap you're not supposed to eat. Eat more of the food that you feel good when you eat it. It's good for you for a lot of reasons. You've tested it, etc. You crave it even. And do that while ignoring most of the gurus and most of the books and podcasts and whatever out there, right? Most of it, not all of it. Keep it simple. And you can live a long and healthy, prosperous life. And you can ignore most of it, okay? So my name is Colin, the Wild CEO, and thanks for watching.